In the news this week, medical experts explain how West Aussies can avoid Victoria's COVID school disaster. An exclusive Q&A with Dr. Andrew Miller.
Also tonight, explosive revelations about Marlon John's death prompt a push for more cultural awareness training.
Perth's water crisis, our groundwater is disappearing fast as climate change bites.
And on Western Perspective, should school leavers take farm work during their holidays? Plus, Dr. Mark Duncan-Smith's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Leung and Sarah Smith.
Good evening. Jabbing children remains the top issue as the state government is working on prevention measures in schools. As WA's jab rate climbs, experts are looking east and explain how can Western Australia avoid Victoria's COVID school disaster. There are also discussions about the third shot for older children. AMA WA spokesperson Dr. Andrew Miller joined me exclusively this week to discuss these matters. Dr. Miller, thanks for your time. What are the potentials of WA schools ended up having COVID crisis just like Victoria when we open up our borders?
Well, we've seen some encouraging signs from Minister for Education Suella this week that they are starting to look at ventilation in schools for what we know is an airborne disease. But West Australians need to be aware that Victoria said the same thing, and yet they have dozens and dozens of early childcare and primary school and senior school cases of COVID, which have caused the closure of these schools, massive disruption to kids' education and health, and also, of course, disrupting the lives of families and adults who then have to rearrange their work in order to look after their kids for remote learning. So to prepare schools for airborne protections, we need to have in place HEPA filters, we need to have in place ventilation assessments which show how many air changes are happening, what levels of carbon dioxide there are in classrooms. And we also need to have rapid antigen testing available so that we can detect cases of COVID early in schools. But mask use, of course, is going to be needed if there is any community spread going on in schools. And we need to see what all these plans are so that we can avoid the kind of disruptions that we're seeing in Victoria at the moment when the borders open and we start to see community cases of COVID here, particularly amongst the unvaccinated, which includes all of our kids up to the age of 12.
What will the scenario mean for Western Australian parents and children?
Well, it's going to be a real shock to West Australians who have been used to taking for granted the fact that they can just drop their kids off at school and life will continue as it normally does. When we open up to there being some COVID in our community, depending on the level of vaccination, we're going to see thousands of cases. And that will mean thousands and thousands of paediatric cases as well. And we know that that can cause short-term problems for the health of some kids. Some will end up being admitted to hospital, as many as 2% who were infected, who tested positive in New South Wales, ended up in hospital. This will be a huge strain on our education system and on our health system. And we need to be sure that people are going to this with their eyes open and with as many protections as we can, including all of those specific things that will reduce airborne spread in schools and in daycares.
When you look at the state government's plan on COVID school preventions, are there anything missing in your opinion?
Well, it's not aggressive enough, in my view, for controlling the airborne spread of COVID in classrooms. There's been a lot of talk about hand washing and cleaning surfaces and so on. And we now know at this stage of the pandemic that it floats in the air like cigarette smoke, and you can wash the desks all you want. You can even do a very expensive deep clean, which is a bit of a waste of time. What you need to be doing is working out how much fresh air there is in classrooms, doing as much as we can outdoors, although we know teachers tell us that large parts of the curriculum need the focus of being indoors. But we need to have clean air in there. So that means a lot of attention to the mechanical ventilation systems. We need to have PPE. We need to have HEPA filters running in the rooms so they can strip any virus from stagnant rooms. And we need to aggressively be testing the kids and the teachers in order to ensure that any outbreaks that occur within a school can be quickly contained with as little disruption to people by way of health impact, but also educational impact. There was a lot of talk about wanting to get kids back into schools in Victoria. Well, it's not working at the moment. We've got to do better than they've done.
There's a big discussion on the third jab. When do you think children aged below 16 are going to get their third one?
Well, the urgent priority, of course, is to vaccinate those 5 to 11. We know that Canada and the US are doing it. Parts of Europe are doing it now. They realise that not only is this group vulnerable to the virus, not only did they end up in hospital, and unfortunately, rarely some of them will die from it, we know that they're very good at spreading it. And this idea that they don't spread it to adults is very old-fashioned and based on some bad data that came out of the original variant of the Wuhan virus. It doesn't apply to Delta. Kids, of course, are infecting their entire families when they take it home. And even if the parents have had 2 doses of vaccine, they can still get quite sick, particularly if those vaccines have been some time ago. So the 3rd dose, I think, for older children will come within probably be 4 months after they've had it, our adolescents, and we need to get the rest of them getting their 2nd dose. So the 12 to 15-year-old group, probably in about 4 months from when they've had their 2nd dose. And for the younger kids, getting onto the 5 to 11s, hopefully really, really soon, because if we can start getting them vaccinated before the school year of 2022, that will actually set Western Australia up to continue with the success that we've had so far, rather than look more like Victoria.
But Doctor, end of the year is near. Do you believe the 3rd jab will happen early next year for younger and older children?
Well, it won't happen. The 3rd dose can't happen that soon for very young kids because they haven't had their 1st dose yet, and we've got to get that approved early so that we can roll it out early in the new year, and hopefully they've already ordered that vaccine. And then the older children, basically we just got to get their 2nd dose in as quick as possible so the 4 months will expire, or the 3 months, whatever they decide, and we can get them topped up. There's still a little bit of resistance from some medical experts who are quite happy to let this vaccine circulate. There's still a little bit of resistance from some experts who have been saying that it's okay for young kids to get infected with COVID. That's a wrong view. We should not be allowing them to catch it. We should not be allowing them to get sick and end up in hospital. We should not be allowing them to spread it in the community. So hopefully the news that Canada and the US and Europe have successfully rolled out this vaccine with no problems for younger kids means that we can get onto it as soon as possible.
Dr. Miller, thanks for joining us this week.
Great to be with you and the viewers. Thanks very much, Ivan.
The latest revelation about Marlon John's tragic death revealed by WAMN News continues to send shockwaves through the community. Mr. Johns was killed after he was hit by a train.
The shocking revelation has prompted Aboriginal advocates to push for extra cultural awareness training amongst transit officers and other authorities. Reporter Melissa Thorne is on top of this exclusive story. Melly, the reaction has been swift.
Yes, Ivan and Sarah. The impact of the death of Marlon Johns continues to shake the West Australian community after explosive revelations and allegations of discrimination in Perth's train system revealed by WAMN News. I visited Mr. Johns' grieving family last week before the story went to air, who are still devastated by the loss of their son in late February this year. After a night out, Mr. Johns was hit by a train near Fremantle Station. Shockingly, an ex-PTA officer alleged that there is a culture of discrimination among transit officers.
On a scale of 1 to 10, it's sitting at probably a 6. Yeah. But anything above 1's not good. Every 3 to 6 months, they do retraining in their batons and their handcuffs. Yeah. Yeah. How to use that. They need to do then 6 monthly retraining on cultural awareness. Yeah. And fairness. Cultural awareness and fairness. They need to include that. Because just because someone's got a criminal record and they've recently been misbehaving, it doesn't mean they're coming to misbehave that day. You have to treat them at ground zero.
Was he a marked man to a certain extent?
Most definitely.
Okay,
the guy had a target on his back. People who knew Marlon Johns knew to watch out for him. You know, it was always sort of said to, if you see him, kick him off your station.
These fresh revelations have prompted Indigenous Australian advocates to respond swiftly. Nullamaya CEO Mervyn Eads has commented on the impact of Marlon Johns' tragic death.
A life was lost, and there is answers that need to be given to the family.
Mr Eads is now pushing for greater cultural awareness training among the state's public transport officers.
Regular updates on cultural awareness, and when dealing with our First Nations people and all multicultural people, They need to have regular updates on their cultural awareness training. And
Mr Eads added that cultural awareness training should also incorporate both multicultural and First Nations cultural understanding.
we live in a multicultural society. It's got to be the cultural awareness has got to be multiculturalised.
The Public Transport Authority stated that they have a zero tolerance policy towards racism or any other form of discrimination, and that all transit officers undertake cultural awareness training by a recognised provider. The PTA has also stated that they have a very multicultural workforce, including Indigenous officers. It will be important to see whether this tragedy will prompt extra cultural awareness and fairness training, and if this will prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future. You can read the full Marlon John's report and statement from the Public Transport Authority on our website. Back to you both.
Thanks, Melly.
Every weekend.
We begin with a story you will only see here.
In news still unfolding,
Ivan Loon, Sarah Smith, and the award-winning WAMN team bring you the exclusive stories and interviews that set the agenda.
I watched live on WAM News.
Plus, Dr. Andrew Miller's expert medical comment.
We don't want to see large numbers of children admitted to hospital because it's going to put enormous pressure.
Sunday evening news and WP, every Sunday night after 6:30 on WAMN News, Perth's alternative voice.
new reports have revealed Perth's water crisis is deepening, with groundwater reserves disappearing fast. Climate change remains one of the key drivers of water shortages, with drinking water supply set to reduce by a whopping 27%. That's the equivalent of 1,000 Optus stadiums worth of lost water.
Western Australia's water supply are drying up before our very eyes. The state government, however, has announced a plan to combat the loss of groundwater due to climate change.
We've seen a 15% decline in Perth's rainfall due to climate change over the last 40 years. That has had a very significant impact upon Perth's drinking water supply.
The plan will mean licensed groundwater users will have their water entitlements limited to 10%, while the amount of groundwater used by the Water Corporation for Perth's drinking water supply will be reduced by 27%. This, combined with a proposed plan to limit bore water used by households, will save up to 70 gigalitres of water.
Our groundwater systems are currently out of balance because of the impacts of climate change. Now, that can't continue.
This water will then be helped used to rejuvenate the important wetlands, lakes and parks that makes Perth the beautiful city that it is.
Dependent ecosystems, our lakes, wetlands, Banksia woodlands around Perth are some of the most ecologically productive and biodiverse areas around our city. We've lost a lot of wetlands over the years due to drainage and urbanisation, and those that we have left are really worth protecting.
The plan to limit groundwater supply to the Water Corporation and licensed groundwater users will take effect in July 2028. The state government is also going to invest $1.4 billion in the creation of another desalination plant to provide more drinking water. Mark Mcgowan's electorate office has shut its doors this week after threats from anti-vaxxers. The Premier's Rockingham office and staff have been subjected to violence, with claims of a bomb being thrown at a building and the arrival of an armoured car equipped with machine gun. Mr Mcgowan has condemned these threats, calling it unbelievable conduct.
All I'd say is some of this extremist behaviour is verging on urban terrorism. It's demented, it's deranged, it's outrageous, it's selfish. And I just urge these people to stop. Harassing kids at their schools or in shopping centres is not the Australian way. And I'd urge these people who seem to think they know better than every medical professional around the world to stop with their behaviour.
Final preparations for leavers are coming together as Year 12 students get ready to head down to Dunsborough to celebrate the end of high school. This year, authorities are asking leavers entering the zone to have at least one COVID jab before they arrive. Although jabs are available at the Leavers Pavilion, young people are advised to get their vaccination certificates ready. Stay safe and look out for your mates are among the key messages for leavers, and parents are encouraged to stay in touch but let their kids have fun. Here's some extra advice from Luke Collins, a journalist at Youth Jam Radio.
At the moment, parents should be aware that there is going to take some time if your child is actually going down to leavers. If they do need to still get their vaccine, they will need to have that certificate done. They will need to have it before they enter the venue itself. And from what I've been told by other students who have had some difficulties accessing their certificates, that may be a bit of a lengthy process. So do not leave that to the last minute. Have that either finalised or finished just before you actually take off. As far as just general advice, the same applies for any other leavers. Make sure you pack food, water, all the other particular essentials. They may not seem important at the time, but they should particularly be followed.
A man has been charged by police for 17 counts of driving while disqualified. The 29-year-old Medley man was discovered to have driven several times between July and October this year, after an investigation by officers from WA Police Force Operation Nimrod. Police caught the man illegally driving late last month, and he appeared at the Perth Magistrates Court this week.
More Western Australians are getting skilled in the automotive industry with a huge jump in apprenticeships and traineeships. Commencements have increased more than 176% since September 2016, with almost 7,200 publicly funded enrolments in automotive training so far in 2021. Job ads for mechanics have risen 61%, and with the opening of a new automotive training centre, the Mcgowan government says the courses will help meet demand for skilled labour.
We have seen our numbers increase by well over 100% in the last 18 months. We have in excess of 500 light vehicle mechanics in training here today, and we will train over 800 people in total this year.
Construction has begun on a new bypass set to reduce congestion on Perth roads. The Great Eastern Highway bypass is expected to provide better links between industrial area and support commercial developments in Midland. The project will include construction of multi-level interchanges along Great Eastern Highway at Abernethy Road and Road Highway. Meanwhile, Loy Street will also be extended. The project is expected to be completed for 2024, where the government says it will reduce peak hour travel times.
Can I again thank the federal government and their contribution to this project. We have worked well to deliver a number of projects across Western Australia.
We've looked at what the needs are for people, particularly heavy transport. The bridge across the Helena River will be a tremendous outcome, and our contribution of $247 million for this intersection will make a difference.
Well, I know you're in Midland quite often. What are you going to do with all the time saved on your commute?
I've got 3 years to make up my mind, Sarah.
That's true.
I'll take my time. We'll recap this week's top stories again in just a moment.
But right now, here's Nelson Liu with Western Perspective.
Thanks, Ivan and Sarah. Hello, I'm Nelson Liu and welcome to WP. This week, school is coming to an end, with many students leaving Year 12. School leavers are set to celebrate into summer, but with WA's agriculture sector calling for help, should they be working instead? I spoke with the Pastoralists and Graziers Association's WA President, Tony Seabrook, about the impact young workers could make to the industry. Tony Seabrook, thank you for your time. First of all, leavers is coming. With continual calls for help from the agriculture sector, do you believe young people should be working instead of partying?
It's a free world. It really is. You know, when I was a young guy, I was pretty motivated by getting on, and I was a worker from day one. Everybody gets the outcome in their life that they're prepared to work for. If these young fellas and girls want to go away and have a good time for a short while, that's for sure. But there are a lot of farmers' sons and daughters that won't be going away. They've come home already, and they'll be on the farm helping their parents get their crops off.
Is it going to be a benefit to young people?
Look, first of all, with Mcgowan shutdown of the state borders, the wheat belt of Western Australia has got a monumental crop to get off with a very, very dire shortage of good experienced labour. Most of the farm kids that are back home now have grown up on farms. They're responsible, they're careful, they're operating gear that in many cases is worth close to $1 million. It's unfortunate that young kids are having to be put in a situation, but they do have the skills. But it's not a matter of getting people out of the city to come and do this. You can't. You know, they have no experience whatsoever, and the chance of hurting themselves way too great.
Finally, the agriculture sector and farms have been calling for young workers for a while now, but there are concerns that these young people might not necessarily have the experience. What are the risks and how can they be mitigated if workers are vital?
Look, picking fruit, vegetables, grapes, all that sort of stuff, it's fairly steady, solid work easy to supervise. They're not at a great deal of risk there, and you can control the environment. But when you put someone in a harvester, chasing bin or a truck, where you've got a large piece of equipment, up to 20 tonnes, 30 tonnes sometimes, travelling at speed, it really just is not a place for those that don't have experience. But one of the really sad things is that I believe the unemployment in Australia is sitting at over 800,000 people unemployed. There are jobs going to burn everywhere. I'm afraid there are too many people in Australia that are a bit too damn precious. And the only way to squeeze them out is to turn the money down a bit, because when you can make a reasonable living doing nothing, then you're not going to go to work. And it's just bloody reprehensible that so many people in this country, at a time when we're so short of labour, say they can't find a job.
Tony Seabrook, thanks for joining us.
I hope you managed to play most of it, because there's not a word I said there that I don't absolutely believe in.
And now, here's AMA WA President Dr Mark Duncan-Smith with this week's COVID-19 update and commentary.
Good Sunday evening to everyone. Big talk today this week has been, I won't say the two words together, anti, and the word vaccination, because I think it empowers the so-called people, and they don't deserve it. So I use the words either people that don't like vaccines or pro-disease. What we've seen this week in Perth is the people who are pro-disease causing havoc at Joondalup vaccination centre, actually intimidating school-aged children through a fake news reporter, videoing children in the line to get their COVID vaccination with their parents' permission. The fake interviewer actually asked the teacher what they had told the children about the vaccine, and he said no comment. The people that don't like vaccines then said, so all you've told the children is no comment. This is about fear. This is about intimidation. The feedback we've had is that those children have actually said that they are fearful that they are now on video and will be targeted by the people who don't like vaccines. This is outrageous. This is unacceptable. This is disgusting, and it is incredibly disturbing. I've called on the Mcgowan government to either introduce immediate legislation for safe access zones along the lines of women's choices, or potentially to use the current emergency medical orders to prevent this sort of thing happening again. We cannot allow our children to be intimidated and abused by these people. Now, for these people that are pro-disease, please do not try to stick to your guns when COVID hits here. I'm actually imploring you, do not try to stick to your guns and not go to hospital if you get COVID. There's a chance you will die if you do that, and we don't want you to do that. So the people that you are sending death threats to and threats about hanging their family are the ones that are going to be welcoming you in to take care of you when you get sick. Now, there's a thing called Occam's razor. Now, that basically says that the simplest solution to a problem is typically the solution. Now, if you take the postulation that there is a conspiracy with Big Pharma, with governments, with the AMA, with doctors, that we're all making this up, and that the millions of people that have already died around the world didn't really die, and you put that against the simple solution that COVID is real, COVID is coming, and if you get COVID, you've got a 95% chance that if you have to go to hospital, you're going to be one of those people that isn't vaccinated. Now, Occam's razor would suggest that it's either a conspiracy, which is just ridiculous, or COVID is real. So again, understand the statistics. 95% of admissions to hospital currently in America who are admitted with COVID disease are unvaccinated. In Australia, a recent study has shown that 95% of people that get admitted to ICU are unvaccinated. Of the people that get admitted to ICU, 1/3 of them die. Get the message. Get vaccinated. If you don't want to get vaccinated, don't stick to your guns when this thing hits us. Even though you're abusing us and saying and threatening us, we will still take care of you. Don't stick to your guns. Come to hospital if you get sick. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
And that's WP for this week. We'll be back again next time, but for now, it's back to you, Ivan and Sarah.
Thanks, Nelson. And here's Leo with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, Carson. On 6 News, breaking news: demonstrations continue against that controversial proposed pandemic legislation here in Victoria as nooses and gallows appear outside the state's parliament. The Prime Minister now denouncing real or threatened violence. But why are some people so angry? Plus, Austria imposes a total lockdown on both vaccinated and unvaccinated people, mandating the vaccine for the entire population. But it seems some are mixing up the European nation with Australia. We'll fact check the false claims. And Dan Andrews on track for a third term as Victorian Premier, according to the first major news poll since the so-called Dan slide of 2018. The coalition needing to pick up 19 seats to form a majority government, but currently they're on track to lose 7. You can see full details on those stories and plenty more by going to our YouTube channel. Just search 6 News Australia to find us, or our website 6newsau.com. For now though, guys, it's back to you.
Thanks, Leo. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. You can catch the latest anytime on our website, wamnews.com.au.
From Sarah and myself, we wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for stopping by.